Welcome to Motivate You, the Winner Circle here, your host, June Archer. Today I have a guest who is, let's say, very interesting. Super excited to talk about this. He is an innovative expert in mold contamination and remediation. He is only in his 30s, but he is already turning the mold remediation world on its ear with his unique approach to this business. You may not know that millions of Americans are struggling with the effects of mold exposure on their health. Many seek out mold remediation companies, but still suffer after the job has been done. That's because many conventional mold remediation companies are not doing such a great job. Here today to talk about mold remediation, and all things mold, please welcome to the show, Mark Rubino. Michael, how you doing?
I'm doing well, June. Thanks for having me.
You look like a Mark, so you may even have a brother named Mark. But we have
Mark and
Michael
Mike's pretty
Rubino.
close.
Michael, thank you so much for joining the show today. Super excited about this. For those who are not, because I know that people move into homes and they see this. Some people have lived in their homes for years, maybe even generations, has seen this and don't know what it is. Can you tell us what mold is and why it even exists and how it exists?
Sure. So mold is an actual living organism. It's a microorganism. And that meaning that you actually can't see it with the naked eye. It's microscopic, which surprises you because you're like, well, that's not true. I've seen it on a wall before, right? By that, it means you actually have tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions of it already colonized in a group right there on the wall. And that's how much it takes for you to actually physically see it, right? I look at mold the way I look at weeds, because it's very similar in structure. Weeds have roots, as we know. They grow in our lawns, and they kill everything in sight. And they produce seeds, and the seeds get into the air. They fall down. It happens to rain, and guess what? That begets more weeds. Mold is very similar in that regard. It has roots called hyphae that grow into our homes, something that we actually don't want to happen. And it produces by means of spores. So just like seeds, these spores, they circulate around the house, they get aerosolized. And as soon as they find a source of water or moisture, those spores start to grow into more mold. And so that's how mold can be such a hidden problem in our homes that becomes just worse and worse as time goes on.
Now, if we see this mold, you're in the business of remediation. That means
Yeah.
removing this organism from in our homes. I know that I've seen it in bathrooms, kitchens. Where else will we see mold?
So very commonly, if you have like a basement, depending on where you live in America, you could have a basement or a crawl space. It's very common to see mold in a basement or a crawl space, even behind the wall where you can't see it. It's very common to see it in an attic, unfortunately, roof leaks and things like that. Another common place is around doors and windows. As the counter flashing around doors and windows when they're originally installed starts to break down, water and moisture can intrude. The other place to see it is on exterior walls. If you have, siding or stucco on your outside, again, as that begins to deteriorate, water and moisture can get in and you can start to see it come that way.
So water and moisture are the main ingredients to mold actually living amongst us.
Right.
Is that true? Okay. Now, here's the thing. I know I have been guilty of it. So just for those who are watching and listening, you may see it in the bathroom and you put Ajax on it or you put Comet on it. Do these means help at all when you see mold in like a shower?
Well, I guess it depends on how the mold is growing, right? So if it's growing on, let's say, the surface of the tile, I would say wiping it away with even soap and water would be effective. Doesn't really matter what product you're using. The problem is that most of the time you see mold in your shower, it's actually growing on the grout. And what that could be indicative of is the fact that there could be moisture getting behind the grout, behind the tile, and actually growing in your wall cavity. So by the time you see it, you're seeing it poking out on the grout, but it's actually much larger in growth from where it actually is.
Now, what do people need to know in terms of remediation? It sounds like a really big word, but
Yes.
Michael, we see mold and we call you. What is the process of the remediation that we can understand from just a basic level?
Yeah, so basically, I'd say one of the reasons why I'm known as an expert and why I'm called from people all across the country is because I've figured out that there's a specific set of processes that need to be done, especially for someone who could be sensitive to mold. And I don't know if you know that, but there are a subset of the population that actually has other genetic predispositions that make them sensitive to particulate matter, such as mold. In that regard, what we're realizing is that, hey, standard remediation only catered to people who weren't sensitive to mold. And I feel like anything that's standardized that should be universal, it should work for everybody, right? So what I
Right.
figured out is one important thing that's missing in remediation industry. We talked earlier about how mold is a lot like weeds, how it produces seeds, things like that get into the air, right? And that's how mold begets more mold. Well, let's dive into that for a second. So if we have mold that's growing inside our wall cavity, let's say due to a window leak, and that mold is constantly producing more mold, and that mold is getting into the air. Now it's able to get into the HVAC system, right? Because the HVAC system, what does it do? It sucks air in, it conditions it, and supplies it back out. So guess where a good source of moisture happens to be? The HVAC
Coming through our ventilation.
coil. The coil constantly condensates. So when that coil is condensating, it's providing, again, a wet environment for mold to grow. So as mold gets into the HVAC system, it now starts to grow inside the HVAC system. Again, mold begets more mold. Now that's producing seeds, right? And so as this continually makes its way around the house, it gets into your breathing zone. It enters the body that way. What's scary about mold is, and you can go on the American Lung Association website or EPA and you talk about particulate matter. Anything smaller than 10 micrometers, it has the danger of passing straight through the respiratory tract and directly entering the bloodstream because it's so small. Mold is that small. It's smaller than 10 micrometers, happens to be, typically 2 to 4 micrometers. So now mold, if you're inhaling, let's say 10,000 particles per cubic meter, that's going right past the respiratory tract, right into the bloodstream. And so if you're sensitive, it's definitely going to be debilitating to you, right? So we have to look at that and say, so that one place that had mold, not only does that need to be remediated, but the entire house needs to be cleaned. Otherwise, it's going to get into the HVAC, it's going to get into other areas, and it's going to make the problem a lot worse. So I started to realize, hey, this isn't just about the mold growing inside that wall cavity. We got to do a stellar job at really cleaning the place thereafter. And honestly, that is something that everyone in the restoration industry has missed for the past 20, 30 years.
And why do you think that is, Michael?
I think mainly because the insurance companies are probably the big proponents to mold remediation. They write more checks than the average homeowner does because usually when someone has a water leak, they call their insurance company. The insurance company sends their preferred contractor out there, and you don't really have to worry about much. And the insurance company wants to control these costs, right? They don't want you to know that mold produces spores, that they get aerosolized and get all over the house. They've kind of programmed our society to saying, as long as you can't see it, it can't hurt you. And I think we've all kind of woken up to this thing called COVID-19. What you can't see actually can hurt you. So it's never been a better time to really focus on air quality. The fact tried calling me and it blacked out for a second. Can you still hear me?
Yeah, you're good.
Good. So considering we take 20,000 breaths per day, I think making sure we have good air quality inside of our homes has never been more important.
I want to just go back just a touch. You talk
Yes.
about the insurance companies. Is this something that that you can have the insurance companies cover in the event that you have more of a widespread situation of mold, or is this something that you have to pay for yourself? This is nothing that the insurance company is going to cover, even if it kind of affects you from a pre-existing condition, right? There are some people who have allergies. Some people have they're on the breathing system, right? Like
Right.
how does one afford the opportunity to take care of this from a remediation standpoint if they can't afford it and they
You
need it?
know, June, it's so messed up. It's such a great question, but the reality of it is the insurance companies, they're so far behind the times and they're so tied into these companies, these massive companies like, without mentioning any names, we've all seen these companies advertise on TV. They're all basically working for the insurance company, right? And I think the problem really becomes when you get someone who knows what they're talking about and says, "Hey, look, we have not only mold in this wall cavity from this leak, but now it's inside the HVAC, and you could test it and see if the species correlate, right? And if they do, it's a good indicator that hey, it's very possible it started from here and got into the HVAC system." Most of the time with my clients, the insurance company, if all their own really should be paying the whole thing, right? But because again, we've been programmed as a society that to only worry about that one little instance, not the systemic problems that come with it. They don't cover the whole thing, and that's something that I've been really fighting for the last decade, advocating for change. Writing the book The Mold Medic was something that I really wanted to get out in the public sector because how does anything change in our country, right? We have to become aware of it, then we have to start fighting people like the insurance companies, these fly by night contractors that don't do things the right way. Once we're aware that these things need to change, that's when we can start to say, well, you know what? I'm not giving you my money anymore if you don't insure me properly, or I'm not giving you my money if you don't do the right job, to protect my family's health.
I love how you put that, and I want to implore people who are listening and watching to do that, to get a look at what you have in those areas that have moisture and water. For those who may not see it on the surface, Michael, what are some of the symptoms that may occur that will give us, that red flag that we may potentially have a situation of mold in our homes?
Okay, so really good question. Brain fog is probably the biggest one that I hear about. Kind of where it just you start thinking, you lose your train of thought. You're like, what was I just doing, or what was I just thinking about? That's a big one. The other thing is cognitive difficulties, right? Slurred speech and just difficulty really getting your words out and your points across. Allergy-like symptoms where you feel like you're getting this cold that just never goes away. If you feel like you've had a cold for just months and months and months and you can't figure it out, it's a good idea to start racking your head around, did we have some water intrusion occur lately? Or did something in the environment change that could be contributing to this? Hay fever, runny nose, stuffy nose, itchy, burning eyes, headaches, migraines, things like that. There's a lot of symptoms. What makes it so challenging is a lot of these symptoms correlate with so many other diagnoses out there. So, my advice is always this: if you feel like you're not feeling yourself and you go to a doctor, your regular doctor, and you're like, hey, I'm not, this is what I'm feeling, and they can't figure it out. Again, medical professionals, for the most part, they're not thinking about air. They usually go to, mental health. They go to food, right? They go to, did you change detergents? Did you change shampoos? Like those are the first things they go to. And what's so crazy is, guys, we take 20,000 breaths per day, right? Air is
Wow.
the number one thing we consume, more than water, more than food, more than anything. I always say, if you're not feeling well and everything else does not make sense, check your air.
Wow. Wow. Should we be alarmed if we happen to see, because some people may jump the gun and they really don't know. And of course, you handle just about any size, but if it's just something really small, should people be alarmed? Or what are some of the preventative things that they could do, or action items they could do right away in the event that they see a little bit of, mold spores or maybe a patch in their bathroom or in their kitchen or in their basement? What could they do immediately?
So what I think they would do immediately is call a mold inspector. I think they're the best qualified to see what's going on. If you see something small, get in front of it now before it becomes a much bigger problem. I've seen, small things cost just a couple thousand. which I know is like, whoa, that's a lot. But I've seen big things cost a couple $100,000. So in terms of the magnitude, you'd rather have $1,000 headache than a $10,000 headache, right? So I would say if you see something, get ahead of it right away, because the longer you let it go, the worse it gets.
For those who may not even know where to find help, are there any websites? What is your website that we could share with people that are listening and watching today?
Yeah, so allamericanrestoration.com is my website. And actually, I give a ton of free resources on that website. You can find mold inspectors. You can find public adjusters. Is something we didn't touch on, but a public adjuster is essentially like, if you do have an insurance claim, they're kind of like your attorney. They'll take a percentage of the overall claim and help fight you and make sure you get covered what you're entitled for. We have, all kinds of doctors that specialize in mold and helping you detox from having mold exposure. So there's a ton of free resources on that website. I highly recommend it. And then you can also go to themoldmedic.com to learn more about the book that I wrote. And that'll really tell you and educate you on the process of what I've come up with and what I'm trying to educate, all of us about, so we can really get that change that's needed.
No, we appreciate that. Another question. Let's say you have a flood, and I'm still trying to wrap my head around exactly how mold takes place. Is it bacteria that's in the water, bacteria in the home, in the air? I've heard people say, "Oh, I just had a flood and we're trying to get this thing cleared out before mold starts to take over." Like, how long does it take, in the event that you have a flood, for mold to actually begin to grow? Like, how far into it? And what is it like? I know we asked you at the top, but is it bacteria? Is it? Yeah. I know it could come through water and those, but is it a bacteria? Like, what is it?
Yeah.
Really?
Okay. So mold is its own organism. Okay. Bacteria is something completely different. It's another microorganism. It's actually even smaller than mold. So mold is part of our ecosystem. It's got a form and function. And really what it does is it helps matter decay. Things that are dead, it helps them decay and kind of gets rid of them. So you'll see mold growing on, dead bark outside. It's in the soil. It's eating, things that are decomposing inside the soil. And what happens is it does come into our environment naturally. And that's okay, because it's the same levels outside as inside. Odds are you're going to feel fine, because most people feel fine outside, right? Yeah. It's when these seeds start to get inside and start to grow and colonize and produce a lot more spores inside than outside. That's when it starts to become problematic. What's a shocker here is certain species of mold can grow in as quickly as 24 to 48 hours of having moisture. And that's going to depend on just exactly how many spores you already have inside the home. Water provides the opportunity, right? Once these spores fall inside that wet area, it could start to grow and colonize right then and there. And it's not just water and moisture. You have humidity too, right? A lot of people don't realize, but humidity is a form of moisture. So it's how much moisture is in the air at that exact moment. So, depending on where you live, like in Florida where I'm at, it's pretty much humid year round. So with that being said, you have to make sure that, your home inside is not creeping up into that danger zone. All it takes is 55% humidity or higher to start to be at risk where mold can start to grow. So, if you're at a humid climate, you always want to make sure, I always tell people, pay attention to your humidistat. You see start to get it to like 70, 75% humidity, something's going on. You got to check it out, get somebody over to check out either your HVAC, are there doors and windows that are open that you're not aware of, things like that. You got to get that under control.
Do dehumidifiers help any at all?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, dehumidifiers, like I recommend for basements and crawl spaces. And then, in more humid climates, I think whole house dehumidifiers are really crucial in making sure you maintain the humidity levels.
Michael, I appreciate your time. I've learned a few things. Hopefully those who are listening and watching did the same. Ladies and gentlemen, it is All American is the company. Mold Medic is the book. Please get it, support them. Go to the website. Give us the website one more time, Michael.
allamericanrestoration.com.
There it is. That's Michael Rubino. He doesn't look like a Mark. He is a Michael. I am June Archer. Thank you so much for watching and listening. This is the Winner Circle Motivate You. Thank y'all so much. Have a great rest of the day.